Now, the thyroid gland, its main hormone that it produces is a hormone called thyroxine. Now, thyroxine is abbreviated as T4, and the 4 stands for the number of iodine molecules present in the hormone. All right, this is the only place in the body that predominantly uses this micronutrient. Now, what does thyroxine do? It regulates your body's metabolism. Now, in this context, metabolism refers to how the body breaks down the food you eat. Okay, how it utilizes that food for energy. Now, thyroxine, the way thyroxine regulates metabolic rate is that it promotes the use of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. It promotes the conversion of those macromolecules into energy. Now, thyroxine's target tissue is all over the body, but predominantly it has its effects in the liver and the skeletal muscles. Now, remember, you guys, there's all sorts of different types of muscles in the body, right? We have cardiac muscle in our heart. We have smooth muscle all over our digestive system and around organs, et cetera, et cetera. Skeletal muscles are muscles that are attached to bones, right? They stabilize our skeleton, and they have rich reserves of a carbohydrate called glycogen. I mentioned glycogen in a past lecture when we talked about the sympathetic nervous system, right? Glycogen is a branched carbohydrate found in the liver and muscles of animals. And it's a quick storage facility for energy, for glucose. All right, once we run out of the glucose that's in our blood, right? Let's say we're doing something active, we're going for a run, or we're in the weight room, or we're scared, right? And we're using energy. That blood glucose is used very quickly, and then our body can turn to glycogen to increase the glucose level. So I've mentioned this before, and this relationship between glycogen and glucose is really important. So when thyroxine is being produced, it kind of goes this way, right? Glycogen is broken down to produce glucose, which gets released into the blood, and our body burns it. All right, now, if we don't have enough carbohydrate reserve, then we will go into our fat reserves. If we run out of energy in our fat reserves, then thyroxine will promote the burning of muscle, okay, for energy. So we will break down the proteins in our body as well. Now, thyroxine is controlled through something called a negative feedback loop. All right, and the release of thyroxine from the thyroid gland is a multi-step system. So the first thing that happens is your hypothalamus, remember the part of your brain that deals with homeostasis, it's constantly monitoring your body, right, for vital signs. And one of the things it monitors is your body temperature. So when your metabolic rate gets lower, your body temperature gets lower, and your hypothalamus realizes this. Okay, so it senses this. It releases a hormone. So the hypothalamus actually releases a hormone called TRH, or thyroid releasing hormone. Now, this hormone is tropic. Remember the word tropic. Tropic means that the hormone targets another gland specifically. Okay, so TRH targets the pituitary gland. And it stimulates the pituitary gland to release another tropic hormone called TSH. All right, so the pituitary releases TSH. It's tropic, meaning it's going to go to another gland. Okay, TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone, and that's exactly what it does. It stimulates the thyroid. Okay, so TSH gets into the blood from the pituitary, takes a short trip down to your neck, and there are receptors in the cells of the thyroid, and once they get bound to this TSH, then they release thyroxine. Okay, so TSH is carried by the blood to the thyroid gland. It promotes the release of thyroxine from the thyroid gland. Thyroxine goes out to the entire body, okay, but mainly has its effect in the liver, the muscles, and the adipose tissue that contains fat cells, okay? And what thyroxine is going to do is promote the breakdown of those compounds. So often you will get questions on the thyroid and thyroxine because it is a multi-step approach to getting these hormones to be released. So I'm going to have you draw this. As I draw it, I've left some space in your note package for you to do that, all right? So we're going to start with the trigger. And what I mean by trigger is what causes this whole cascade to start. Well, your metabolic rate goes down, okay? So a lower metabolic rate. All right, that's our trigger. Now, what is the gland that is responsible for monitoring this? The hypothalamus. Now, generally, the way I see these things represented on a diploma is there's a box usually around the gland, okay? And then there's an arrow coming from the gland, and next to the arrow is the hormone that's being released, okay? And in this case, it is TRH, thyroid releasing hormone, all right? So that's released by the hypothalamus in response to low metabolic rate. What is the target for TRH? The pituitary. Now notice I didn't put anterior there or posterior because we don't need to know the specific lobe. Okay, we just need to know it comes from the pituitary gland. And what comes from the pituitary gland? Another tropic hormone, and in this case it's TSH. Okay, thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, what is the target for TSH? The thyroid. And again, I'm going to put a box around my glands just to show all the steps. And now, what does the thyroid do? The thyroid releases thyroxine. Now, what does thyroxine do? Well, it has a bunch of target tissues, right? It has the liver as a target tissue. It has muscles as a target tissue. Okay, it has fat as a target tissue, and it's going to release energy from those things. Now, I kind of think about the thyroid kind of like your furnace at home, right? Same kind of thing. The release of thyroxine is partly due to your body temperature lowering. Just like, in the wintertime when it's cold, your furnace turns on when the air temperature is cold, right? But once the air temperature in your house gets to a certain level, the furnace gets shut off, right? We don't want to waste natural gas, right? Especially with the price of it these days. We don't want our temperature to get too hot. I mean, warm is great, but you don't want your house at 35 degrees Celsius. So we have a thermostat that shuts it off, all right? It's regulated. Now, thyroxine is the same thing, right? When our metabolic rate goes down, we want to get it up. We want energy, okay? But we don't want too much. So we need to regulate the release of thyroxine, and it's done through something called negative feedback. So thyroxine is released into the body, and it floods our body. Although the target tissues are, the liver and muscles and stuff, it's all over our body, and it makes its way back up to our brain. So we use a dotted line to show the negative feedback. So this is called negative feedback. And what I mean by this is thyroxine will actually go back to the hypothalamus, and there are receptors in the hypothalamus for thyroxine. And when thyroxine fills up these receptors, what happens is it shuts off TRF. Okay, so when there's too much thyroxine in the blood, it shuts off TRF. Now, once TRF gets shut down, what happens? TSH gets shut down, right? And once TSH gets shut down, then what happens? Thyroxine gets shut down. Okay? And that's negative feedback. So the release of thyroxine actually controls the release of thyroxine, okay, by negatively feeding back to the original gland that was responsible for this whole cascade to begin with. Now, there is also some negative feedback of thyroxine to the pituitary as well, just to make sure that this system works. Now, what's going to happen is over time, this thyroxine that had flooded your body, it's going to start to dissipate. It's going to disappear. It will dislodge from the receptors in the hypothalamus and pituitary, and then it gets turned back on again. Okay? And in this way, thyroxine is regulated. Now, too much thyroxine can cause all sorts of problems in our body. So hyperthyroidism is a disorder associated with the production of too much thyroxine. Now, what is this going to do to a person? What happens if you have too much thyroxine? Well, typically you will lose a lot of weight and you can't gain weight. Unfortunately, thyroxine will burn through your sugar in your blood, it'll burn through your glycogen, it'll burn through your fat, but it'll start to burn through your muscles and the proteins in your body as well. So your hair gets brittle, your fingernails get brittle, okay? Your skin gets dry. You're heat intolerant. That means that because your body's like a furnace, right? It's burning all of these carbohydrates and proteins for energy, and your temperature is going to go up. So you're very heat intolerant. You can't really stand any kind of high temperatures. You have a hard time sleeping, insomnia, anxiety, rapid heartbeat, which can lead to heart murmurs. So there's actually a lot of bad things that can go wrong if our thyroxine levels get too high. Now, there's a type of hyperthyroidism known as Graves' disease. Graves' disease is caused by an autoimmune response. So your body's own immune system attacks the cells of the thyroid, causes it to become swollen and enlarged, and causes more thyroxine to be released. And one of the consequences of Graves' disease, if it's left untreated, is there's hormones that can collect in the muscles and fat behind the eyeballs and actually push the eyeballs out. I was reading about some cases of this where it got so bad, it's called exophthalmos, it got so bad that the people actually couldn't blink anymore. So even when they went to sleep, they'd have to sleep with their eyes open. Can you imagine that? Right? So constant eye infections, because blinking helps to clean your cornea, right? And yeah, sleeping with your eyes open. So hyperthyroidism can be controlled with medication, which would block the secretion of thyroxine. Okay, surgery can remove some of the thyroid, and then radioactive iodine. So I mentioned earlier that iodine is really only used in your body, in your thyroid, to produce thyroxine. So if you ingest radioactive iodine, all that radioactive iodine will collect in your thyroid gland, and the radioactivity will actually destroy the tissues of the thyroid. So once that is done, okay, once the tissues are removed or destroyed using radioactivity, they will not produce thyroxine anymore. So for the rest of your life, you have to take synthetic thyroxine to compensate for the loss of the thyroid gland. Now, the opposite of hyper is hypo. Okay, hypo means under. Hypothyroidism is the underproduction of thyroxine. So the symptoms are kind of the opposite of hyperthyroidism, right? Weight gain, lethargy. Lethargy means like you're kind of sleepy and tired, and heart rate would be low, puffy skin. So this is an underproduction of thyroxine. Now, there is a special type of hypothyroidism that can occur if thyroid levels are low during infancy. Okay? Now, during childhood and infancy, we're growing and developing. Our brains are growing, our organs are growing and developing, and not only does thyroxine regulate our metabolic rate, but in children, it actually regulates some development as well. So hypothyroidism in children is much more serious than in adults. You can see here I have a picture of 3 teenage girls here. They range in age from 14 to 17, so they're like your age. And you can see there that they have suffered from severe hypothyroidism in childhood, and you can see that they are severely underdeveloped. An enlargement of the thyroid is called a goiter. All right, and this can be for a number of different reasons, but one of the main reasons for goiter is an iodine deficiency. So if you don't have enough iodine in your diet, you won't produce enough thyroxine. And what happens is the thyroxine doesn't go back and inhibit the TRH. It doesn't inhibit the TSH. So the thyroid is constantly getting a message that it needs to make more thyroxine. And it thinks it's making something, but it's not making thyroxine. So there's no negative feedback. So it's constantly getting this signal, make more thyroxine, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, because it's getting a constant message from the hypothalamus and pituitary, so it gets enlarged. Okay, it can also be caused, goiter can also be caused by tumors, infections like autoimmune disorders like Graves' disease. Okay, so a goiter is just kind of any enlargement of the thyroid. Now, another important role of the thyroid is the regulation of blood calcium levels. I think if I were to ask you why is calcium important, I think most people would say, oh, it's important, you need to drink milk because it's good for your bones and your teeth, right? And absolutely, that is definitely one thing calcium is used for, but we forget that calcium is really important in muscle contraction. I don't know if you guys remember back to Biology 20, you talked all about muscle contraction, and calcium is essential for allowing the fibers of your muscles to contract. It's really important in blood clotting. So we need calcium, all right, for all of those things. But too much calcium in your blood is a bad thing. It can cause muscle cramps. It can cause bone aches. It can cause kidney stones, neurological disorders. All right, so we don't want too little, but we also don't want too much. All right, we want like Goldilocks. We want just the right amount. So there are 2 hormones that work in opposition of one another to make sure that our calcium levels fall within an acceptable range. Okay, the first hormone is called calcitonin, and it is secreted by the thyroid gland in response to calcium levels of the blood that are too high. Remember, too much calcium in your blood is a bad thing. So under these circumstances, your thyroid would secrete calcitonin. And what calcitonin does is it moves calcium from your blood, out of your blood, into your bones, into your urine, and into your feces, so you get rid of it. Okay? So too much calcium, not a good thing. Calcitonin causes your calcium levels to drop in your blood. Now, I always got confused between this and the next hormone we're going to look at, parathyroid hormone. I can never keep the 2 straight. So I kind of came up with a mnemonic device to help me. Okay, and this helps me. I don't know if it'll help you. But the way I remember it is calcium. Okay, right? Calcium goes to and in to the bones, urine, feces. Okay? So if calcium is going to and in to the bones, where's it going from? Your blood. And if it's leaving your blood, what's going to happen to the blood calcium levels? It's going to go down. It's going to drop. So calcitonin, calcium goes to and in bones, feces, urine. Okay? So calcium levels in your blood are going to drop. Now, if they get too low, that's going to prevent your blood from clotting. It's going to cause muscle cramps. It's going to cause all sorts of other problems. So when that happens, another hormone is released from another set of glands called the parathyroid glands, and the hormone is called the parathyroid hormone. So the parathyroid glands are embedded within the thyroid, and their job is to secrete PTH, parathyroid hormone, when your blood calcium levels get too low. So if you don't have enough calcium, then basically what happens is your body steals the calcium from your bones. Okay, your body kind of says, okay, what's more important? Strong bones or the ability to, contract my heart muscles? The ability to clot my blood if there's an injury. So your body kind of says, well, yeah, bones are going to have to take a back seat to that stuff. So basically, parathyroid hormone causes calcium to return to your blood from things like your urine and your bones. Okay? So if you chronically didn't have enough calcium in your diet, what eventually would happen? All the calcium would be leached out of your bones and you'd have really brittle bones. Okay? So that's why calcium is important, so that your body doesn't kind of have to steal it from your bones. Okay? Now, what do we call two systems that work in opposition of one another? We saw this in the nervous system with the parasympathetic and sympathetic. Anytime two systems work in opposition of one another, we call them antagonistic. So calcitonin and parathyroid hormone are antagonistic to one another. It's like kids on a teeter-totter in the playground, right? If one kid goes down, the other kid goes up. When one kid goes down, the other kid goes up, back and forth. But if we were to take the average, over, 20 minutes at the playground, where would the teeter-totter be? Right in the middle, right? And that's kind of how parathyroid hormone and calcitonin work. Sometimes the blood calcium levels get up, and calcitonin is released, blood calcium goes down, and then parathyroid is released, it goes up, goes down. So think of these kids on the teeter-totter. One is calcitonin, and one is parathyroid hormone. Okay? And they work in opposition of one another. And when they do that, they maintain homeostasis. All right, so we added another 4 hormones, right? We added TRH, we added thyroxine, we added calcitonin, and we added parathyroid hormone, all right? And we added 2 more glands, the thyroid and the parathyroids.